Hi, welcome back to the Community Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Todd Welsh. We're at podcast number 11 with Brian Richardson. Today, we're going to talk to him about his community development of downtown, how he got inspired to get into the residential and the commercial space. We're going to talk about being the coach of the Eagles baseball team and the Salina Falcons, and then a little bit more about his community involvement with the Economic Development Committee, the Airport Authority, and the Chamber of Commerce, and everything that the Richardson family is doing for the community of Salina, Kansas. Let's tune in and talk to Brian Richardson. All right, so we're here with Brian Richardson, and we're going to talk to him about being our community leader spotlight. But before we do that, if you watched last episode, we were looking for a sponsor for the podcast, and since the guest that we had was drinking Mocha's coffee, we thought we should go out and talk to Mocha's and see if we could get them to be our sponsor for the show. And you guys were amazing. I can't tell you how many texts Jason Ingermanson got, but it was enough text for him to say, hey, I'll sponsor the podcast. So what we're going to do is we call this the Mocha's Minute. And I stopped by this morning. I got me a hot chocolate, and Brian Richardson's with me today. And I said, hey, Brian, what do you want to get for Mocha's? And you got the what?
I got the iced tea.
The iced tea I picked up this morning for you. The lady, she said, hot chocolate and iced tea. She goes, that's a very weird mixture. And I said, well, they're not both for me. And I don't know if she thought I was going to mix them together or what. But anyway, thank you to JRI Hospitality, which owns Mocha's, to Jason Ingermanson, and the Mocha's Minute. And this one today I'm trying out is the hot chocolate. And we'll see where we go from there. So each one of our guests will be able to stop by Mocha's beforehand, or we're going to send our producer, Matthew, out to get the coffee beforehand. But thank you to Mocha's for sponsoring the podcast. It's our first sponsorship, and we're going to go from there. But anyway, so we're going to jump right into my good friend, Brian Richardson. Brian, how are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Thanks, Todd.
Good. So for the viewers that are listening, we're going to chat today, but it's going to be very interesting because as we were talking earlier, could be about 30 years we've known each other.
Yes.
So this interview is not going to be really an interview. It may even be a little bit of a catching up. It may even be a little bit of, do you remember when? We were talking about that right before we came up here, and you're like, oh, I forgot we did that, or I didn't even know I did that. So I'm going to bring up a lot of stuff from the past, and then we're going to talk about what you've been doing in the community in the middle, and then where you're headed with, you guys are doing some really cool stuff with your family in the real estate business, and we want to talk about that a little bit. But first, 30 seconds, tell the listeners who you are.
Well, I'm Brian Richardson. Grew up in Emporia, Kansas. Been in Salina now just over 30 years. Married my wife 31 years ago yesterday.
Nice.
As we celebrated our anniversary. And we've got 3 kids that are all here in the community today helping us. So we've got Jared, Brogan, and Brooks. And enjoy the Salina community and everything that's going on as a whole.
Yeah. What do you do? Let's start out with just what your full-time job is, like your regular job, before we get into other stuff in there.
The one that pays the bills?
The one that pays the bills, yeah.
I'm fortunate to work for a neat little company called Occupational Performance Corp. And it's here in Salina. It started almost 35 years ago by Dr. Gary Harbin and his dad. And today I run that with a gentleman called John Olson, and he and I manage this location. And we've actually got about 160 locations in 18 states that we work with on a daily basis. And we do work comp here in the community. We do a lot of the services for employers when they hire somebody. So whether that be a drug test or an eye exam, respirator fits, all of those types of things. But one of the things that we're really known for is a piece of equipment that we've patented called the Physical Capacity Profile. And it's a strength testing system. It takes about 20 minutes to run somebody through it, but it gives you a good idea of one, can they physically do a job? And then 2, what really makes a difference is it documents anything they might be bringing to the employer for an injury or an impairment. And so that they don't end up paying maybe for a work comp claim that they didn't cause, that happened back at high school or a football accident. And I was one of those types of person coming in. I had a rotator cuff injury way back when in college baseball, and when I went through that particular test, it showed something happened. So that's what we do with occupational performance.
Okay, cool. Let's go all the way back to in your age of 18, 19 years old, because I want them to get an understanding. Because when I do these community leader podcasts, I don't want to talk about just what you're doing today. Like, I really am doing this for myself to say, For you, I kind of remember some stuff, but again, it's been a while since we've really connected, and it's been 30 years ago to remember some of the stories of what we know. So take me back to when you're 18, 19, graduating high school. Where are you originally from, and where'd you go from there?
Well, Todd, I'm finding each day I don't remember as far back in those things that happened, but I did grow up in Emporia, Kansas, and so Emporia High School, I was a three-sport athlete, playing football, wrestled, was on a couple really fun wrestling teams that were ranked nationally, and then played baseball and chose to move forward doing that after high school. But, I grew up on a farm with 3 siblings. All of us are within 4 years. My brothers are 10 months apart, so my parents were busy.
Yes.
But we had a really neat growing up experience, I guess, if you will, and my family's all still in Emporia. They all live about a mile apart. My sister and my 2 brothers, and then my parents, and I've got aunts and uncles, and they reside all again within a 2 or 3 mile radius. And so it was a neat experience growing up. I was in 4-H. I worked at IBP, which was the processing plant, a beef processing plant, and I worked out in the yard unloading cattle and cleaning out the pens, which by no means was a glorious job, but it paid well. And they were flexible with the hours that I was trying to play baseball and do some different things for schooling, and so it was a good experience overall.
And then where did you go? Did you get a scholarship? Because I know you're baseball, so let's talk about that a little bit. You played baseball at Emporia State?
I actually went to Hutch JUCO first and played baseball.
Okay.
There was a gentleman that's going to kind of come full circle. Some of the audience may know, but Coach Brad Hill played at Emporia State. He played for the Texas Rangers. He came back and was a grad assistant while I was coming through high school. He ended up getting the Hutch Junior College baseball position, so I followed him out of high school to Hutch JUCO, and played there 2 years. I went back, finished my last 2 years of baseball at Emporia State. Had met Julie at Hutch, and then she and I both ended up at Emporia and got married coming out of that, and then right back to Salina. Actually, Julie wasn't out of school yet, and I moved to the Salina community, and then she followed about 6 months later after she finished. And I shared the Brad Hill story because he's a Kansas guy. Went from Hutch, ended up coaching at KU. Most recently was at K-State for about 15 years, and just was hired 2 weeks ago to go back and be the Emporia State baseball coach. And so kind of a neat Kansas kid coming home. He's from Canton Galva down by McPherson, and will now be the Emporia State coach. So I talked to him last week, and first time in almost 25 years since I'd visited with him. Yeah. And so that's what I did from a baseball standpoint.
Okay. And then you will talk about your job, because let's go to where you maybe won't remember how we first met or where we first met, and why I remember is kind of weird on there, but I'm going to take you all the way back down. You were working for Value Line, so you brought Value Line to town. So for some of the listeners that are here, you were maybe really one of the first reps who came to town for Value Line, correct?
Correct. Yep. And I did that probably about 15 years, and Value Line then turned to Birch, and I know some people still have Birch telephone service today, but that was out of Emporia, Kansas. So I worked for a gentleman that was very supportive of baseball as a whole, and specifically Emporia State baseball. It gave me the opportunity to come out to Salina and knock on doors and sell long distance and telephone systems.
Yeah, that was selling long distance. That was funny. It's like
dial a long code, stand on one foot with your hand on your notes.
I remember you calling me going, "Hey, you're paying 18 cents a minute, and I get you down to 9 cents a minute." And I'm like going, "Okay, I think that's a good deal." But you were selling long distance, which is so funny as we think back now, but that's where it is. But where I really remember meeting you at is the first time I met you was in, I'm going to call it Jerry Deal's driveway. Okay. So you were in the driveway because you had bought the house in 40 acres? Is that really what Morse Drive? 50 acres.
Jerry's house.
Okay.
Jerry and Judy's house.
So how old would you have been at that time?
I would have been probably 24.
Yeah. So 24. And you bought a large piece of property known as Moore's Drive now. If those who don't know where it is, that's where I live. That's where you lived for a long time. We've been neighbors for a long time, but out of Country Club in Simpson. Anyway, I pull up. You're 24. I'm probably 23 or 24. And you're in this white Ford Ranger. Okay? That's pretty good memory, isn't it?
Yeah, you got a good memory.
It's a white Ford Ranger. You roll down the window, and roll down the window, reach across, roll down the window, and you had stacks of stuff in your seat, and you had to move all that out of the way. And we sat down, and I think I was supposed to be there for like 15 minutes, and you and I just hit it off, and for like an hour we just chatted. And I was amazed. I was just amazed of what your vision was, because at that time it was this old kind of dilapidated house. It wasn't bad, but it needed some work. And there was just 50 acres of nothing. And I'm 23 from Denver, Colorado. Haven't lived here very long. And you start to lay out what you're going to do in this 50 acres. And I'm like going, I'm either intrigued or this guy is completely nuts. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to build houses out here and we've got a development going in and all that. And I wasn't in the real estate business at that time. You know, like I think I was selling copy machines maybe at that time. I'm not sure where I was at. So that was my first experience with you. And it must have been an amazing one, because there's not a lot of people that I can remember meeting for the first time that I would say, okay, there, but huge influence for me. Like, I just totally remember that moment of meeting you going, okay, this guy is either, like I said, I didn't know whether you were crazy yet or this is somebody who I wanted to be around. So let's go a little bit further than that. We ended up being really good friends, still are great friends. It's just things have grown apart. You were my neighbor for a long time. So I ended up buying a lot out there that you were selling. It wasn't even basically I bought what you said was going to be a lot. Yeah. There was nothing there yet.
See this napkin?
Yeah, you're like, see this? This is the lot I want you to buy. And you must have liked me, because I wanted the lot at the top of the hill and you wanted me to buy the lot across the street from you. So fast forward, we built homes across from each other, and we were neighbors and really best friends for 10 or 15 years.
Yep.
And I say, not that our friendship is any worse now, but
just doing different
things. You know what I mean? Would love to reconnect with you, but it's always one of those things where I go, God, I'd love to call Brian, but I know how busy you are. And then sometimes people say that about me. They're like, oh, I'd love to talk to you, but I just know how busy you are. So then nobody ever calls, you know? And so anyway, we built that deal there. And then we kind of got into some partnerships with some homes. Do you remember that?
I do.
So I feel like I'm doing all the talking, but I'm excited as I can remember some of the stuff we did, because what I want you to know, and I want the listeners to know, is what an influence you had on my career, and you don't even know it. And I'm going to take you back to one of the deals that we did, which was on 9th Street. And the reason I bring this one up specifically is because this is the point of where I started to learn from you. And we bought a house on 9th Street. I think I was in real estate at the time. And we had been buying other homes and flipping them, but there was one particular one that we bought on 9th Street. And we closed on a Friday. On Saturday, I got up at like 7:30, and I called to see, hey, are you ready to go over there and let's get started cleaning up this house on 9th Street? And you answered, and you're like, dude, I've been here since like 6. Like, I've already got everything done. I've got this. I've moved this out. I've done this. I've done this. And so I go over there, and that's the first time I really saw like your work ethic of what you could do. And I was just, again, a little bit of amazed, and we sold that property, and we flipped it so fast. I don't know if you'll remember this. We got called by an attorney because they thought that they had undervalued that home so bad that I had to write a letter telling them all of the things we had done, because they said there is no way you could have bought that house on that amount of time, done this to it, and then sold it for a large profit. You know, the heirs of the estate were upset that the other real estate agent had. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. Yep.
And so
neither one of us knew how to really handle it. We were both young. We were
yeah.
like, what the heck
so
is
at this time we're like 25, and now we got attorneys calling us because we were working too hard.
You talk to him. No, you talk to him.
Yeah. And again, the reason I bring up that moment is because that is the moment where you turned to me and said, hey, you could probably do this on, you know, because I was like, I didn't know how to do that. Like, you were the one who put that all together as far as going and getting the loan from Wanda Wedgwood at Security Savings Bank. And you had that whole relationship there. And it was like, you were the one who gave me the confidence in real estate to go out and say, dude, just take the leap, go do it. You can do this. And then we talked about it in the last podcast when I was building my home. Another thing that you shared with me that built who I am today is you said, I had a house designed, and you looked at the house and you said it's too small. And I said, Brian, I can't even afford this house. You know, like, I'm 24, 25 building this house that was $169,000. And you said, man, it's too small. It's too small. And so I made it bigger with a whole different house and all that stuff. And it made it $199. And I live in this house today, and I thank you each time for that, because had I built the other house, I would have probably outgrown that house. We'd have moved on, and we love the development that we're in. And so we've added onto that house a couple of times, but still, those are little things that I want you to know. I want people in the community to know that's how we know each other, and really to reflect back on who I am today. And people go, gosh, how do you do what you do? And how do you go out and do that stuff that's there? I really look back and go, it's really Brian Richardson who took a kid who was 24, 25 and really said, hey, this is how I do it. You should do the same thing. And you gave me the confidence to go out and say, okay, I'm going to take some risks. And one thing I think about you is you're a big risk taker, and so I've always appreciated that about you. So enough about you and I and what I think of that, but I've always wanted to share that story with you. And it may have felt a little weird if we're sitting at lunch and I go, hey, I want to come clean with you and tell you about this story. But I wanted you to know that I look back on a lot of what I've built based on a couple of transactions that we did when we were 24, 25 years old.
I appreciate you sharing, and it's humbling.
Yeah.
Because I have a lot of respect for you and what you've built, and even back then, you came with not a college education,
right, but
a lot of ideas, experience. Your marketing efforts and concepts were incredible, and so I knew that you didn't need to be me or partners. You could do it, and obviously you've done that.
Yeah.
And then some. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, so let's jump into your community involvement that's there. So that's really what we're about as community leaders. So when I think of you, I think of two things. I think of kids and baseball, and I think of real estate and development, and mostly I think of what you've done downtown. And so first of all, we've got this beautiful picture of downtown, and it looks amazing. And people who come now can say, wow, downtown, that's great. I don't know why I wouldn't invest in that. That's beautiful. But I'm going to go all the way back and say that you were probably the person who most likely, now I think of the Andy Andersons, I appreciate them, the Chuck Carrolls, the Harold Coolies, the Paul Wardens, all those guys who took care of our downtown. And what I want to say, shored it up and did the best they could for a while when they were different. There was no organization. It was hard to get people to agree. I mean, you couldn't get them to agree on what color to paint the light post. But what you saw in there, you own quite a bit of downtown property. And you bought a lot of that downtown property when nobody else was buying it because they didn't see what potentially could happen. Now, I'm not going to go into all the downtown property you own. I just know it's quite a bit of downtown property. But I think I wanted you to be recognized. Like, what was your thought process if we go back there from a community aspect? If you can go back, even 15 or 20 years ago, and it may be more than that. I sold you the first. Do you remember the first building that I sold you? I'm going to see if it's the first one I remember.
I think, yeah. Would have been the Fifth and Iron.
Fifth and Iron,
yep.
Yeah. So Fifth and Iron, where the donut shop is now, is the very first commercial building I sold you. And that maybe is 23 years ago.
At least, yep.
23 years ago, that was the very first part. Now, there's a plaque there for people who needs to know a little Salina history as well. That corner is the first corner where a building went up in Salina, and there's a plaque there that says that. But tell the community a little bit what you saw back in the downtown and what made that important to you to kind of revitalize the downtown.
Our I guess first efforts, being Julie and I, and getting into downtown was the old Brown Mackey College after a couple of the smaller buildings, and we'd bought them and we'd sold them and done okay. But there were several bigger buildings that were sitting and blighted at that point in time. I'm going to be wrong on time frames, but Brown Mackey had moved out.
Right.
That particular building was 2 and 3 buildings wide. And it was dilapidating. The windows were getting broke. So that was one that we took a look at, decided that, hey, this is something we think we can do. And that, Todd, was probably back in 2005, give or take. So, we're getting close to 20 years on that one. And so we were able to get in and do some things with that building and several others like that. But it was really just, as you mentioned, there was a lull in downtown. There had been a lot of history, a lot of great things that had happened, but we were kind of going through some transitions. Even as you mentioned years ago, they couldn't decide on where they wanted to put the mall. One idea was to put it basically where the alley is today.
Right.
And again, nobody in the community at that point in time could agree, and so it went south. And that kind of has, for many years, was a divide between the community downtown, and I think that has slowly begun to heal with some of the things that are happening because both are doing really well. And
right.
If I'm staying at the Hampton Inn out south, I may eat out south, but I may also move to downtown to eat at one of the new restaurants and shop down there. So,
not to interrupt you, but I want the listeners to know, because these are neat things to know about. I didn't know this, until maybe, I mean, I've known it for about 20 years, but a lot of people don't know that if you go, like when you go to Manhattan, how close the mall is to the downtown, that was the original plan for Salina. There were I don't want to say the forefathers, but there were community leaders at the time, and that's how come they're like where the new stage sets and they cleared out all of those buildings. So the mall was supposed to be, my understanding, somewhere between where the KU Med Center is now and what used to be the bank and the new coffee shop. All the way down, they eliminated, took out all of those buildings all the way to where the alley sits now. That's why that's vacated. There used to be an old hotel there, and they tore that down. But that was a proposal for the mall to go in down there, and then they just couldn't get some of the property owners to agree. Now that I look at it, though, I mean, it could have changed the dynamics of everything. But really, when Warmack, who created the mall, went out south and bought all of that ground, it really started to stretch Salina out to the south where it's at. But anyway, didn't mean to interrupt you, but those are little fun facts that I want people to know when we're dealing with developers like you, to say, when you brought that back up, to say, hey, this is what it was going to be. Then it kind of went to here, and then now look at it today. So continue on your Brown Mackey and what your thoughts are with the lofts, because that's really what you specialize in.
You know, we figured out pretty quickly that the retail side, the commercial, doesn't pay for a building, or at least that was been my experience in getting into those. And so it really becomes the second floor that you have to make work some way, somehow. And so at the time, there were probably, and I may be off a little bit, but I think there were maybe 5 or 6 lofts in downtown Salina at that point. And so we went in to the Brown Mackey, now Crest building is what our family refers to it as on our inventory list. But, you know, we put in several lofts there, have been successful in doing that, but also learned a lot on that project, do's and don'ts. And as people come to me and say, hey, okay, your sprinkler system you've got to put in is going to cost you a whole lot more than you think it's going to cost. Hey, if you do this, it's going to. So I learned a lot, and in spite of that, it's been okay. And we moved forward with doing some more. And so, you know, it's kind of moved down the block. One of them that you helped me with that was kind of close to you is the Anderson building that had burnt. Had caught fire. It had set for several years, and you would come to me and say, hey, Brian, this one, is this something of interest? And again, kind of went through and probably told you no once or twice, and came back and did it. And again, it's been a great partnership with Monty, with Blue Sky, and we've got 5 lofts, 4 in an office upstairs in that facility, and then moved across in the town site building and several others in downtown. But
how many lofts do you have downtown now?
Right now, we've got, I think there's 42 lofts in downtown.
Okay.
And they're all, I think they're all 1 bedroom is kind of what we've done. And that's been purposeful because I have found in my experiences through 30 years of real estate that, you know, the 1 bedroom, you sometimes get a better tenant. We're not the cheapest in town, and I don't want to be.
Right.
We get good quality tenants, so I don't have to fix them up when people move out. And I think people have really enjoyed living in Santa Fe, and so we're happy and proud that we're able to help in that way in the community, because there has been a significant need for housing, as everybody's aware. And my daughter now is really running our residential division. She's got another full-time job with a company out of Denver, and so I'm thankful that she continues to help me in addition to doing a little bit of stuff for Salina Homes.
Yeah, she's a licensed agent at Salina Homes and holds her license here, which is great.
And she's proud of that, but she does all of my residential fill at this point in time and is doing a great job. So we're excited that she's back in Salina. She went to Washburn, moved away to Kansas City, worked a few years, and then came home. And that's what we're hoping with what we see behind us.
Yeah,
happens with more and more of our kids, that they get away, go to school, experience something positive, and then want to come back home.
Yeah. Now, granted, let's give also credit where credit's due on there. Like, I think of you as, I mean, I don't want to say the middle guy, but I don't want to take away from the 2020 Vision Group. I don't want to take away from the Walkers, what they've done downtown, to the other investment groups that have put stuff together, to JRI, who's made some big contributions down here. Bob Mueller, who's got some great projects that he's done in here, and they've sunk a bunch of money into everything that Jane Gates has done for the Stiefel. You know, like,
the list goes on.
It does. It really does.
KU
KU with what they did, the hospital, the money they threw into it, the car museum, which we just had Michelle Peck on. But that's like 15 years ago, I would not have put the background of Salina downtown on this wall. But I want people to know that there was this time in between as a real estate agent when I couldn't get anybody to invest in downtown. Now it's easy. Everybody sees that. Now some people just can't afford it because they're just so expensive because it's so nice. But before, you couldn't give those buildings away because they were just so much to maintain and so expensive to do it, and the heat and air and the taxes and and it's still that way today. And you and I know that. I could see the smile coming out of there. Like right now, it's like they're still massive. You know what I mean? Like they're beautiful, but it takes a lot of money to get them up there and then to maintain them, and then just to kind of get them rented and figure all of that stuff out. You know, I mean, commercial is a whole different deal that's there. But you mentioned the Anderson Leather building. That made me laugh a little bit. I used to work at Anderson Leather. The plan was for me to buy Anderson Leather one day until I found out that you couldn't make any money in that type of retail. It was a lot of work, a lot of Saturdays and Sundays. But I always wanted to own that building. And the truth is, when that building caught fire, it was, I'm guessing 2011. Would that be right?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Be close.
And the only reason I know that is there are 2 years in real estate that are the years that come up that are terrible. 2008 almost went broke. 2011, I didn't go broke, but I never thought I would ever sell another house again. Those are the 2 bad times in Salina for housing, where it took a dive, and basically my income's based off selling house. And I was like, oh my God, there's the perfect building I want to buy. It's available. But I was scared to death. And I bring the opportunity to you, and you pounce on the idea. And then the more I'm throughout my career, what I hear is that the most successful people are the ones who say, okay, when times are tough, that's when the opportunity is. And it takes a special person to be able to look at that and go, okay, I don't even know that this is right, but I'm going to do it anyway because I think that the future is much brighter than what I'm currently at now. And so again, lesson number 3 I learned from you was in 2011. And, you know, I'm kind of waiting for, like, I don't want to say I've been excited thinking that there's going to be this little lull coming up when COVID happened. We haven't seen it here. You know what I mean? Like the prices continue to go up more. And like I'm hoarding cash, thinking I'm going to take advantage of when these buildings get really cheap, and they just continue to skyrocket for Salina. But it's because it's beautiful, and we have a great economic. We have all these jobs that's coming to town. So, you know, the chamber's done a great job. The city manager's done it. Everybody's done a great job keeping our economy moving forward. That we haven't seen prices fall down. So I guess, again, I just go back off the learning lesson. I want people to know from the show the learning lessons that I've learned and where most of them come from. And they're little snippets that happen in my life. And they're basically, I mean, other people have taught me stuff. But again, those things stick in my mind. Let's move forward real quick so people can know. Across from the other project I'm so proud of you about is across from, I call it the old Green Lantern at Iron and Santa Fe. Nope, shit. Iron and Ohio. Iron and Ohio. Those apartment buildings that were there, they were dilapidated. You took me through there after you bought them, and we literally could stand in one apartment and see the toilet in the apartment below. Tell me how that came about.
Well, another realtor in town had called and just said, "Hey, I'm going to get this listing. Would you have an interest?" And it seems like my motif is always no several times, and then end up thinking about it, sleeping on it, visiting with my wife and family, and that was one that happened on. Went back about a month later and decided that was something we were willing to tackle. And it was a rough facility at the time, and I'd had, after it was finished, several police officers that had approached and even had called me and just said, "Hey, thanks for what you did," because that was one of the calls that we were regularly getting. You know, at the time we bought it, they had moved people off of the 3rd and 4th floor of one of the buildings because the fire escape had started to separate. And so they had gone in one evening and put people in hotels, and that had been several years prior to me buying it, so it had fallen even farther. And so we had a lot of things to do there. But it's turned out to be a beautiful project, and again, with my daughter leasing that, people stay, and they're smaller apartments. They're not very big,
but they're
people
nice.
Love them.
The master shower in there is nicer than the master shower at my house. I mean, they are. When you took me through there, I was like going, man, this is nicer. This master bathroom is nicer than my master bathroom. So you did a really nice job renovating those. The property looks amazing. And then sticking with that, jumping over, you were also the visionary of the what would that be? The northwest corner where the liquor store is and Gourmet to Go. And so a lot of people, what I love best about you is a lot of people just saw a small postage stamp lot there. And what you see as the developer and a visionary that you are is 3 and 4 houses down. You could take those out and move them, repurpose them, which you took to another site and location. And then you were able to put in that little, I call a strip mall, that's there, and all of those businesses that go in there. Again, it's another one of those things that the only reason I bring it up is because it's a community event. Like, it's a community project that you did. You took that corner that was nothing there for many years, and you made it an amazing, it's a beautiful building, and the services that it offers for that east side of town, we didn't have them before. I mean, Gourmet to Go is a phenomenal restaurant that we have on what I call the northeast side of Salina, where we really didn't have anything like that, coming off the hill, and now you can go there and enjoy a nice lunch and dinner and all that stuff. So tell me a little bit, I don't know if you want to go into detail about that project. I just wanted to mention it on there, but how do you see that stuff as a developer on there? How'd that one come about?
I don't know, Todd, that there was a flash that I remember, but again, we drive by it every day, and it was one of those projects when I worked at Blue Beacon many years ago that I kind of managed, because they had it as a piece of property, as a control, if you will, for their Green Lantern across the street, so there wouldn't be another convenience store or gas come in, and so I managed that particular property, and as I left Blue Beacon and moved on, that was one of those that I'd kept my eye on. And it had the opportunity after visiting with the Walkers and went back and got that piece, was able to work with the neighbors and negotiate getting the rest of the property put together. Found some partners that would work with me on putting the facility up. And I do think it's been a nice project for that corner, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, I've had lots of good partners through the years, to include yourself and others, but one guy that's really helped a lot was Wayne May and his crew. Wayne was with me on the Crest building, or the Brown Mackey, from day one. He actually was working on that building, and that's how I met him. He had been working on that building for the previous owner. And so I got to introduce to him, and it was really a great partnership and still is. And now he's retired and enjoying that. But, in every one of these projects you name, he's been a key piece of that. It wouldn't have happened without him, getting up every day and swinging the hammer or getting his people there. And so,
because the thing of it is, you've had a like all of this remodeling I'm talking about is while you're running another company with a full-time job. Like 7 in the morning until 5 or 6 o'clock at night, and a lot of it was out of town. Like, I know you travel around and do whatever. So all of these, like, I can barely manage projects, and I'm in town, And so, again, I know how much Wayne was important to you, because Wayne took a lot of bullets, met with the city, had a bunch of stuff when it would all go in there. He was a guy who really had your back
100%.
The whole time. I mean, he had your best interest on there. And I think that's a good lesson to be learned also for any entrepreneur that's listening, or somebody who wants to get into development or real estate or whatever. It's like, surround yourself with great people. There are learning lessons that happen. Be around successful people that are doing it. Listen to what they're doing. And then when the opportunity comes, start to surround yourself with people who have your back and want the best for you and the best for the community and everything. And Wayne May really was that guy for you.
Todd, it's a great point, and I visit with my kids as they're learning now some of the pieces that we do, and those are teaching moments, if you will. But people that think they've either done it on their own or they're going to do it on their own are nuts.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't happen that way, and so I tell my kids, surround your people, yourself with people that you want to be like, and that will have your best interest. You're right on, but you also need a good lending institution or financials.
Right.
And I've been very fortunate in Salina to have 2 or 3 or 4 of those that have been very supportive, but you can't do it without extra money. I know Dave Ramsey didn't want to hear that.
Right.
But that's reality. If you want to take some risk, and it can certainly go the other way. You can be broke tomorrow, and a lot of developers and entrepreneurs are.
Yep.
But you've got to have those relationships, and again, it takes the city. It takes a lot of subs, from your plumbers to your electricians. And I have great ones today that I can rely on. And I use a core group, but I have a lot of relationships in the community that have been really, really good to me for those. And that's the only way that works. So, again, you've got to surround yourself with people and people that will be supportive. So that's great advice for anybody. And it's certainly that's why we've done what we've done.
Yeah. I want to move on to your community involvement with groups that you're involved with, and then the baseball kids. But the last thing, because it is a big community piece, with all of your investors and yourself, I want the community to know how many units is your management company? How many total units do you think you guys manage right now, from commercial and residential? Do you think you guys are managing?
Today we're in the neighborhood of 330 to 350 is what
350 doors.
350 doors.
Yeah.
And some of we may be a little light because some are A's and B's and C's on some commercial properties, but in that neighborhood is what our family is managing.
It's phenomenal. Yeah, I mean, again, I look back at where you were and what that would take to get 350 doors, and don't want to go into this, but you've now moved into a whole nother segment of retirement homes.
We have.
Of purchasing retirement homes, which, again, I'm going to look back in 10 years when all these baby boomers, which are probably already in the retirement homes, are there. That's a big need that we would need, and probably I say lucrative. I'm sure there's its own pitfalls. Everything, the grass looks greener on the other side, but filling those and maintaining them and finding employees and nurses and stuff, whole nother gamut of what's going on. So let's flip though real quick. Tell me a little bit about your community involvement with getting involved in the community through non-for-profits or the city and chamber. What have you been doing recently with that?
Well, I serve on the Salina baseball board, and I'm very, very happy and have had a lot of fulfillment, if you will, from the baseball out of both Emporia, and immediately took over coaching here. Now I'll be my 26th year in coaching baseball, and got another team this summer, and this will be my last one as my youngest graduates, goes to play baseball in college, and so I've been fortunate with that experience. Both of our boys have gotten scholarships and played college in baseball, baseball in college. And so this will be the last year for me, but I'll still be involved, or hope to be involved, with Salina baseball moving forward. But been touched by lots of many young men that have gone through, from 13-year-olds, kind of where I started, to today. I have the 18 U's, the 18 and under group here in the community, and have for several years.
And what's the name of what do you guys are called?
Well, we're the Falcons.
Falcons,
is
okay.
the team, so that's the highest. And I was actually the Eagles' first coach. Salina baseball Eagles was the third team that the Legion program put together back in the early 2000s, and I was the first Eagles coach, and then moved to the Hawks and then to the Falcons, and have done some things on the side involving in that. But so that's been a fun group and an organization that I really enjoy being a part of. I was on the chamber board for a number of years and chaired that. Salina Downtown Inc., probably 7 or 8 years, and again was a good group, and kind of was the start ahead of this. This was back in the 2010, 2011, and today I'm chairing the Salina Economic Development Board. And again, lots of fun things continue to happen in Salina, and new employers that are looking to come, specifically out at maybe the airport area,
right?
That people can stay tuned to hearing on what that is, because there's some really exciting pieces.
It's kind of getting out a little bit. It's going to be a big secret. I heard about it, and nobody would say anything, and now, believe it or not, those people are starting to call.
Yes, they are.
For housing.
For housing. Yep, they're looking for places out of California.
Out of California, yeah. So there's a nice project that I had heard was coming, and now it's coming to fruition because those people are starting to look for places.
Yep.
And
the governor signed some of the documents that need to be signed for that to happen, and so it is going to happen. It'll depend on what size and scale.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of ancillaries that will spin off of that, and so the concern right now is, okay, more people, where are we going to find them? Where are we going to put the housing, and so on and so forth? And I know you're very involved in the housing projects that are now getting staked,
right,
to be brought out of the ground, and so that's certainly necessary. And we see that in everything that we're doing with trying to find good people, and knock on wood, we've been able to do that in Salina ourselves with our retirement home and other entities that we've got, that we've been fortunate in that way. But it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said, I think with the baseball, it's interesting to see that that's going to come to an end. But with Brooks will be his last year.
Yeah, he just graduated, and we'll go to Washburn to play. So.
Oh, Washburn, nice. But I think that with Brogan moving back, and then Jared taking over the management company, and what you guys are building as a family legacy, and I don't want to take words out of your mouth, but I always tell people that Salina has been good to me. Salina has been amazing to me, and I can see that with you. Is number one is you're humbled enough and enough to say you can do great things, but Salina the community I mean, the community has given back to you, though, but you've given to the community as well. You know what I mean? It's been a nice partnership for me to watch your family, where you came from Emporia at 23 years old, and to build what you've built today. Great for you, but great for the community. Like, I can just think of all of the things and the projects I've watched you do over 20 years and go, okay, this is a guy who is, the cloth is deep in Salina, and then the community, and then all of the baseball stuff. So it's like funny when I called you on the phone and I'm like, hey, I'd love to have you on Community Leaders. And you're like, well, I don't know that I'm really, I don't know that I'm right for that. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, again, when I'm thinking about putting this together, I may end up doing like 3 more of these and go, okay, I've interviewed all of the guys who I want to interview who were influential in my life, and I watched in the community. That isn't true. What I'm finding out is there are pockets of people in this community that I don't even know. And then I find out what they're doing. I'm like, I didn't know they were doing that, and now they're on the queue to have brought in to go, okay, tell me what you're doing out at K-State Salina and what you did for those kids and how that project came in and so I think I know everything going on. I don't know anything, like I know a small smidget of what's going on.
I'm honored to be asked, and truly am, but you're right. Every day you learn of somebody else that makes our community go. And certainly there are names on buildings that have done that for years and continue to do so. I mean, I've lived in Hutchinson, I've lived in Emporia, and have had spent other time in different communities as I've traveled across really the United States. And Salina's second to none if you really want to stop and think about the partnerships as a whole, from the community and public. We've seen it with the building of the field house to other activities that continue to grow in Salina. And you certainly are in the know of people. So to say that, hey, I didn't know that was happening, or I didn't know that individual was involved in that.
Yeah.
And I listened to the Chad Kasem podcast that you did, and the involvement that Chad's done. There's name after name after name, and I use the field house as an example because you went back to the 2020, and so the field house and Pat Beatty and myself in starting that, but the number of people that stepped up to support that,
I forgot about.
It would never have happened, and that kind of started the seed to remove the old Phoenix and the Hilton Hotel downtown. And the Walkers and the Brighams and the Sid Ritzes, and I mean, the list goes on and on. And the best, those people continue and have for years helped this community.
I forgot about it. I can't let that pass. You just mentioned that real quick. The vision for the field house where it's at today, like that was your vision. And I don't care what anybody else says. Anybody can debate that whatever they want, but I remember that was your vision of how to tear down that old dilapidated hotel that drug people were staying in, and how you saw that there, I don't know. And I watched you get fought by the commissioners back then that they wanted to move it out south, or they wanted to move it over by the Bicentennial Center, and they wanted to move it like that was the worst location for that. And you fought and you fought and you fought, and you finally got it there. And I know I've heard Trace Walker specifically say that's one of the reasons, one of the pieces that got put together that allowed them to invest their $100 million through everything else that they've done. It's a piece that put together for them to put together the Star Bond. Like everything just fell into place. But what I know is that you were the person who got the ball rolling before all of this. Is beautiful. This is beautiful. But it didn't used to look beautiful. You know what I mean? And without you putting together these pieces that were put together 10 or 15 years ago, we would not have what we have today. And I'll debate that with anybody, because I was pretty strong in the downtown for a long time, and I knew what was going on. And I knew that if we didn't change that, we were going to lose it. It was just going to get too far gone. And to watch you continue to invest and put your family money in it and find other partners who saw your vision, and then to fight for the field house. Again, I want people to know that in the community. I hope these tapes on YouTube go on forever, and so people 50 years from now are watching us talk about how our downtown got to where it is today.
Well, again, I appreciate it. That was a huge project for us at the time, and That was about 2010, 2011, and I was sitting in a chamber meeting. Tim Rogers was there in the back with the airport authority, and the chamber board was discussing different options. How do we continue to be progressive and do some different things? And Tim stood up. I remember it specifically saying, I'm not doing anything else or talking about further development in the downtown area until that Phoenix Hotel is gone. And that kind of started the wheels rolling in my head. Okay, what would that take? What would that look like? And at the time, Mr. Frick owned the property, and I had built relationship through the years with Ben and his wife. And so I went and visited, and like many, I didn't have a warm welcoming in that with Ben. And it took about 2 years in discussions and working through and talking with and sharing my vision with him and his family. And eventually we got that done. And the next battle was kind of through the city. As the city manager wasn't for it. They wanted a movie theater and some other things. And I said, hey, there's a train track goes right behind it. What's going to happen when the train blows at 10 o'clock when the movie's going on? And then somebody else wanted housing. So same problem. So we worked through those pieces of it. But, we got it bought. I actually mortgaged our house to make that happen. And that was, again, back in your 2008. We're still kind of in that in 2010, right. 2011. And went then one of my first pieces were Pat Beatty and starting to help, but one of my first calls were to the Walkers. And a quick tidbit if we've got time,
yeah.
But I worked for the Walkers for probably 5 or 6 years and ended up getting turned sideways with some internal people and got let go. That's the background of Brian Richardson with Blue Beacon, and it was a position I loved with Green Lantern, and I traveled around, did the construction and the real estate for them, and so to be let go, that was one of probably the hardest things that had ever happened to me.
Right.
And so to go back.
But look, it's the best thing that ever happened.
100%.
As you look back now, it is the best thing that ever happened.
And I'm really good friends with the Walkers
yep.
as a whole, and Trace and Mike and Guy and the list. And yeah, everything happens for a reason.
Yep.
I 100% believe that in my faith of God and what happens. And looking back, yeah, I wouldn't have anything that I have for different reasons.
Right.
If I'd been still at Blue Beacon. And so they let me go. Again, I had a baby 2 weeks away. In fact, now it tells you that Brooks was the baby and coming. So it was 18 years ago. And we had just started a $100,000 plus remodel in a house. And so, the timing couldn't have been worse. And so it was devastating. We landed on our feet, fortunately, after some time and tears. And so fast forward that about 4, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, probably 8 years. My phone call out to Trace was, hey, do you guys have time to meet? I've got an idea. And so Trace and Mike, we both met at Mocha's downtown at the time. We've got in a corner. I kind of put together if you know my technical skills, it was a crude PowerPoint.
But usually the ones you show me are on napkins. So, you actually made it to a
PowerPoint.
Yeah,
it was the Walkers. So I got a little PowerPoint, and both of them said, hey, how can we help? And so it was, at the time, was one of the biggest projects that they had done for money. But they too had the vision. They could say, if you can do this, we're going to give you X. And that was a huge contribution at the point in time to get us rolling, because then it became reality. And, like so many things the Walkers and others have done, they're behind that. But, that was a tough call to make, and gracious on their end. And again, we're good friends today. And Trace is one that has told me through the process of sometimes, Brian, you may have more, bigger gonads than brains in some cases, and says, but you always make it work. I said, okay, I think thanks, Trace.
Yeah, I think that was a compliment, right?
Trace. But anyway, again, it does take all kinds of people to make things happen, and that certainly was the project. And as you said, it's moved through with 2020, and everybody else has now jumped on board, not only in this, but out at the airport, down south, you've got Crestwood with Mike has continued to make expansions, and there's just a lot of people that you and I know that have done awesome things for Salina.
Yeah. Well, I think in wrapping some stuff up, if there's a young person, entrepreneur, listening to this, and when I interviewed Jeff Wells a couple back on the Community Leader podcast, one thing we wanted to drive home was that people see the success that people are having now, including yourself, including the Jeff Wellses, including the people that are in this community. And what I find funny is I knew us all back when we didn't have that success, and we were scrambling and trying to figure out probably where they're at today. And is there any advice that you have in the wisdom of specifically in development and success? And is there one key thing that comes away that you can think of that we could leave a piece of advice for somebody who wants to be a Brian Richardson in the community for the next 20 years? What would you say to them?
Well, one, shoot higher. Not just, it's not Brian Rich, go to really do something. But, I think we've shared a little bit, and those are build a network around yourself, because you're not going to be able to do it. There are going to be tough days, and there may be things that don't go well. There will be failures, and every one of those failures leads to the next opportunity. And I think certainly as developers, and you see that in anybody that takes a risk and puts their toe in the water, they're not going to succeed every time. There's going to be failures, but the ones that can take those failures and move to the next step will be the ones that will be successful. And the other was probably, as I grew up on the farm and hauled hay and did all the things that I did, my dad always said, if you're willing to work, if you're willing to get out of bed, get out there at 6 a.m. or stay out till midnight doing what you love to do, then you're going to be successful, because not everybody's going to do that, and you're going to have the leg up, but you got to be willing to work. And I think, as you look at young people, there's certainly been a lot of blame and fault laid on some. But, I tell you, I work with a lot of good young kids that are willing to work, and they've got creative ideas, and they may do it differently than I did and you did it 30 years ago.
Right.
But they figure it out, and there's lots of young people out there that are willing to do it. So, again, build a network, treat people the way you want to be treated. I mean, that's another huge motto in our house is, we could raise rents, but I don't be fair, because it's going to come back around. And, Jared and I have that conversation, and Brogan now working and running our retirement home with my wife, Julie, at Reflections Retirement. And, we want to be the fair, but we don't have to be, again, the one that are driving people away from a rate stand, because it's going to come back to you. Yeah. And so treat people fair, and you'll be rewarded for it.
Yeah. I think it's great advice. I think the one, if somebody were to ask me that question, or if anybody, eventually I'm going to have somebody interview me, but the thing that's going to come up for me of my success, and I look back on it, is I have always been consistent. And that's what I tell most people on there of saying when they're like, well, what's this? I'm like, even if I don't have anything to do or on my to-do schedule, I'm at work. Like I get up out of bed, I go to work, and I continue to do whatever, because the opportunities will show up, but you got to be out there around the people doing whatever it is. And I think that's it. Like have never given up. It's consistent. I get out of bed, I go to work, I get out of bed, I go to work, I get out of bed, I go to work, even if I don't have anything planned for the day. And I may not do anything that day, but I kept moving forward, you know what I mean? And I think that's the advice that anytime I had a gentleman who wanted to get in the business, he goes, well, tell me what you know. And I just said, it's consistency. It's just getting up, moving forward, and wanting to do that, because you're going to fail, and I don't know, I'm not great at quotes, all that, but what they say is like, you don't fail until until you actually quit. And you and I could do a whole nother podcast of failures, money lost, and what we learned from that. And that would be another 2-hour deal that's there. I don't even know that I want to go down that road anymore of money lost and opportunities. But again, we learned from that, and it got us where we're at. So anyway, again, phenomenal family, what you guys have accomplished, what you give to the community, what you've given to youth baseball and all the mentorship of what you've done for those people, what you've done for the downtown, all your civic duties on sitting on the boards and giving your experience of what's done on there. That's the reason you're on Community Leaders. I want to thank you for taking the time that's here, and just really want to say appreciate it, and thank you for being in Salina.
Well, appreciate your friendship, and I too am happy to be here in Salina.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian.